Be my perfect lie. The private auction house glittered with old money and new ambition. For Aisha Johnson, it was a minefield of crystal champagne flutes and casual cruelty. She moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, her catering uniform armor of anonymity as she balanced a tray of hors d'oeuvres worth more than her monthly rent. The gig paid triple her usual rate, and she needed every penny. Her father's dream, a small restaurant in Brooklyn that had collapsed under debt, had become her nightmare inheritance. Culinary school tuition was overdue. The collection agencies called daily. She was drowning in someone else's failed dream while trying to build her own. Across the marble expanse, Liam Vance felt a different kind of suffocation. He stood among the city's elite, a king in his domain, yet completely trapped. The Hartley deal, a merger that would cement his tech empire's dominance, hung by a thread. Richard Hartley, the conservative billionaire investor, had made his terms crystal clear. I don't do business with playboys. Show me stability. Show me you're a family man, or I'm walking. Liam's jaw tightened. His brief, disastrous relationship with Victoria Thorne had made tabloid headlines for months. Now she was circling his business like a shark, ready to destroy the deal out of pure spite. He needed a solution. He needed the perfect woman to play the perfect lie. His ice blue eyes scanned the room with surgical precision, analyzing and dismissing potential candidates. Too obvious. Too connected. Too ambitious. And then he saw her. A black woman with natural curls pinned back, moving through the crowd with a grace that seemed both careful and defiant. Hi friends, if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, please click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story as interesting as this one so you don't miss it. Alrighty, now let's keep going. She was beautiful in a way that demanded attention even as she tried to remain invisible, curves that her uniform couldn't hide, intelligent dark eyes that took in everything, a mouth set in a line of quiet determination. He watched as Marcus Webb, a drunk associate from his finance team, cornered her near the service entrance. Webb was slurring his words, his hand reaching for her waist. You look too pretty to be serving drinks, Webb sneered, his breath reeking of scotch. Maybe you should serve me something else later. I'll make it worth your while. Aisha's face went rigid, her knuckles white around the tray. She was calculating, endure the humiliation or risk losing the paycheck. The math was brutal. Liam moved before he'd consciously decided to. He crossed the auction floor in 10 strides, his presence parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. Webb, Liam's voice was a blade wrapped in silk. I see you've met my fiancé. The room went silent. Webb stumbled backward, his face going pale. Aisha stared at Liam, her eyes wide with shock. Liam turned to her, his gaze intense and oddly gentle. Darling, he said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. I've been looking for you everywhere. He took the tray from her hands and passed it to a stunned waiter without breaking eye contact. Webb here was just leaving. Weren't you, Marcus? Webb fled. The whispers began immediately, rippling through the auction house like wildfire. Liam offered Aisha his arm. Play along, he murmured, his voice for her ears only. I promise you, this will be worth your time. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before slipping her hand through his arm. Her touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. This better be good, she whispered back, her voice carrying a thread of steel beneath the velvet. He smiled, a real smile that surprised them both. Oh, it will be. They ended up in a private viewing room, away from prying eyes. Liam closed the door and turned to face her. She had her arms crossed, her posture defensive but her gaze direct and unflinching. Aisha Johnson, he said, making it clear he'd already had her investigated in the 10 minutes since their encounter. Culinary Institute student, top of your pastry program. Father owned Johnson's Soul Kitchen in Brooklyn, closed 2 years ago. You're carrying approximately $47,000 in debt between his outstanding loans and your tuition. Her jaw clenched. The violation of having her life dissected so casually made her want to slap him. "And you're Liam Vance, billionaire asshole who thinks money can buy anything, including people." He didn't flinch. If anything, he looked impressed. "Not buy. Compensate fairly for services rendered." "What services?" Her voice was sharp with suspicion. "I need a fiancé," he said bluntly. "For 3 months. There's a crucial business deal that requires me to appear domestically stable. The investor is extremely conservative. He wants to see commitment, potential for family. The woman I'm currently linked to in the press is a vindictive ex who's actively trying to sabotage me. And you think I'm going to play house with you?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Liam said. He pulled out a sleek tablet and slid it across the table between them. "I'm offering you $250,000. In exchange, you attend 4 major events with me over the next 3 months as my devoted fiancé. We'll need to live together to make it convincing. My penthouse has more than enough space. You'll have your own suite, your own privacy." Aisha's breath caught. $250,000. It would erase every debt, pay for school, and give her enough capital to start her own bakery. It was everything. "What's the catch?" she asked, because there was always a catch. Liam's expression hardened. "Article 11, he said. "The emotional termination clause. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. If either of us develops romantic feelings, emotional attachment, or anything resembling love for the other, the contract is immediately void. You forfeit the entire payment." She stared at him. "You're creating a contract that punishes people for having hearts." "I'm creating a contract with clear parameters," he corrected coldly. "My last relationship was a disaster precisely because emotions clouded judgment. I won't make that mistake again. This is transactional. Professional. Clean." Aisha looked at the tablet, then back at his perfectly controlled face. She thought of her father's legacy drowning her, of her dreams slipping further away each day, of the humiliation she'd just endured from men like Webb. "I want it in writing that I have complete autonomy," she said. "My room is my space. My body is my own. This is public appearances only. We're actors playing a role." "Agreed," Liam said immediately. "Though we'll need to be convincing. That means physical contact in public, holding hands, embraces, possibly kissing for appearances." "For appearances," she repeated firmly. "For appearances," he confirmed. She picked up the tablet and began scrolling through the dense legal text. When she reached Article 11, she read it twice. The clause was elegantly vicious, a trap designed by a man who feared his own heart. "This is insane," she said quietly. "This is necessary," he replied. She looked at him, really looked at him. Past the expensive suit and the cold exterior, she saw something else. A man building walls so high he'd forgotten what he was protecting. She was going to regret this. But she was also going to survive. With a steady hand, she pressed her finger to the signature line. Her name appeared in crisp digital script. Accepted glowed on the screen. "Welcome to the performance, Miss Johnson," Liam said, extending his hand. She shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the unexpected strength in his grip. "Let's hope neither of us forgets we're acting, Mr. Vance." But even as she said it, something electric passed between them, a dangerous current that neither of them acknowledged. The game had begun. Moving into Liam's penthouse was like stepping into a different dimension. The space was a monument to minimalist wealth, all clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and an unsettling silence that felt like luxury and loneliness in equal measure. "Your suite is here," Liam said, leading her down a hallway of polished marble. He opened double doors to reveal rooms that were larger than her entire apartment. A bedroom with a king-sized bed, a sitting area, a bathroom with a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. Everything was decorated in soft creams and golds, beautiful and utterly impersonal. "My quarters are in the opposite wing," he continued, his tone businesslike. We'll share common spaces, kitchen, living room, the terrace. But we each have our privacy. As agreed. Where's your wing? She asked. He gestured vaguely. Far enough. She set down her 2 battered suitcases, everything she owned, in the middle of the pristine bedroom. The contrast was almost laughable. Our first event is tomorrow night, Liam said from the doorway. A dinner with Hartley and his wife. I've arranged for a stylist to come at noon. I'll need to look like I belong on your arm, Aisha finished, her tone sharp. I get it. Transform the poor girl into a princess. His eyes narrowed. That's not what Isn't it? She turned to face him fully. Let's be clear about what this is, Liam. You're paying me to be your perfect accessory. You're proof of concept. I'm decoration with a pulse. You're far more than decoration, he said quietly. Something in his voice made her pause. Hartley is brilliant and ruthless. His wife Margaret is sharper than he is. They'll see through any performance that's less than completely authentic. I need someone intelligent enough to hold their own in conversation, strong enough not to be intimidated, and real enough to make this believable. And you think that's me? I watched you handle Webb tonight, Liam said. You were terrified and furious, but you didn't break. You calculated your options and chose survival without losing your dignity. That's exactly what I need. It was the first genuine compliment he'd given her, and it landed with unexpected weight. The stylist comes at noon, she said, accepting the truce. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Aisha, he said, not looking back at her. Thank you for agreeing to this. Thank the $250,000, she replied. But after he left, she sat on the edge of the massive bed and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd agreed to lie for money. To pretend to love a man who'd contractually forbidden her from actually doing so. She was going to have to be very, very careful. The transformation the next day was surreal. The stylist, a rail-thin woman named Margot with an assessing gaze, arrived with a team of 3 assistants and enough garment bags to clothe a small army. Liam sent over your measurements, Margot said, laying out options on Aisha's bed. But measurements don't tell me who you are. So Aisha, who are you? It was a surprisingly direct question. Aisha found herself answering honestly. I'm a pastry chef. I like things that are beautiful and complex. And I don't do boring. Margot smiled, a real smile. Then we'll get along perfectly. What emerged 2 hours later was still Aisha, but somehow amplified. The dress was a deep emerald silk that draped over her curves like water, elegant and sensual without being obvious. Her natural curls were styled into a crown of soft twists. The makeup was subtle but striking, emphasizing her dark eyes and the full curve of her lips. When she walked into the living room, Liam was waiting by the window, checking his phone. He looked up and froze. She watched his carefully controlled expression crack for just a moment. His eyes widened slightly, his lips parted, and something raw and unguarded flashed across his face before he locked it down again. You look acceptable, he said, his voice rougher than usual. You look like you swallowed your tongue, she replied sweetly. He almost smiled. The car is waiting. In the elevator down to the parking garage, they stood side by side, not touching, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Aisha could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her want to lean closer. We need to establish physical boundaries now, Liam said abruptly. So there's no confusion tonight. Okay. In public, I'll need to touch you. Hand on your back, holding your hand, my arm around your waist. We'll need to look comfortable with each other. Familiar. I understand, Aisha said. If anything makes you genuinely uncomfortable, there's a signal. You touch your right ear. That's our safe word, essentially. I'll immediately create distance. She looked at him, surprised by the consideration. What if you're uncomfortable? I won't be, he said with absolute certainty. Famous last words, she thought. Dinner with the Hartleys was held at an exclusive private club that smelled of old leather and older money. Richard Hartley was exactly as advertised, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of confidence that came from generations of wealth. His wife Margaret was petite, elegant, and possessed a gaze that could dissect you down to your component parts. "Liam," Richard boomed, shaking his hand. "And this must be the mysterious fiancé we've been hearing whispers about." "Aisha Johnson," Liam said smoothly, his hand finding the small of Aisha's back. The touch sent electricity up her spine. "The love of my life." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it should have felt cheap. Instead, the way he looked at her when he said it made her breath catch. "A pleasure," Aisha said, shaking both their hands with the confidence Margot had coached into her. "Tell me, dear," Margaret said as they sat down, her tone friendly but her eyes calculating. "How did you two meet? The press has been frustratingly vague." Aisha smiled, the story they'd rehearsed ready. "At a charity auction, actually. I was working as a caterer, putting myself through culinary school. Liam quite literally swept me off my feet." "She's being modest," Liam interjected, his hand now resting casually on her chair behind her shoulders. Every nerve in her back was aware of how close he was. "I saw her handle a difficult situation with more grace and strength than half the people in that room. I knew immediately she was someone extraordinary." The way he said it, looking at her with those ice blue eyes that had somehow warmed, it didn't feel like acting. "A caterer," Richard said, and there was a note of something in his voice. Not quite disapproval, but skepticism. "That's quite a Cinderella story." "My father owned a restaurant," Aisha said, meeting his gaze directly. "Johnson's Soul Kitchen in Brooklyn. It failed, but not because the food wasn't good enough. Because small businesses in this economy are fighting a losing battle against corporate consolidation and economic inequality." She felt Liam tense slightly beside her. She'd gone off script. But she wouldn't apologize for her father's legacy. Richard's eyebrows rose. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "She's got fire, Liam." "I like that." "Margaret, didn't I say I was tired of these simpering society girls?" "You did," Margaret agreed, a smile playing at her lips. "Tell me about your culinary work, Aisha. What's your specialty?" The dinner flowed from there. Aisha found herself genuinely engaged in conversation about food, about art, about the responsibility that came with wealth. Margaret was brilliant and unexpectedly kind. Richard was challenging but fair. And Liam. Liam was a revelation. He didn't dominate the conversation or show off his intelligence like she'd expected. Instead, he listened. He asked her opinion on business matters. When Richard made a slightly dismissive comment about culinary arts, Liam defended her passion with quiet intensity. "Aisha is an artist," he said firmly. "What she does with pastry is as complex and valuable as anything I do with code. More so, actually. I feed people's data. She feeds their souls." She stared at him, genuinely shocked. That wasn't in the script. That was real. His hand had drifted to her shoulder at some point, his thumb absently stroking her bare skin above the dress's edge. She didn't think he was even aware he was doing it. The touch was light, almost unconscious, but it was setting her entire body on fire. She was in trouble. Later, after dessert, a mediocre creme brulee that Aisha had internally critiqued throughout, they said their goodbyes. Richard shook Liam's hand with genuine warmth. "I like her, Vance. I like you with her. Let's talk next week about moving forward." In the car back to the penthouse, silence stretched between them. Aisha stared out the window at the city lights, trying to process what had just happened. "You went off script," Liam said finally. "I know. It was perfect." She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the car. "You surprised me tonight," she admitted. "How?" "You were kind. Real. I expected you to be performing the whole time, but you weren't. At least not all of it." His jaw tightened. "It's easier to sell a lie when you build it on truth." "And what truth were you building on?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. When they arrived home, They rode the elevator in silence. At her door, she paused. "Thank you," she said, "for defending me to Richard. For what you said about my work." "I meant it," Liam said quietly. They stood in the dimly lit hallway, barely 2 feet apart. She could feel the pull between them, magnetic and dangerous. His eyes dropped to her lips for just a fraction of a second before he controlled himself. "Good night, Aisha," he said, his voice rough. "Good night, Liam." She went into her room and closed the door, leaning against it. Her heart was racing. Her skin still tingled where he'd touched her shoulder. This was supposed to be acting. Supposed to be business. But nothing about the way her body responded to him felt like business. In his own wing, Liam poured himself a scotch with hands that were almost steady. He'd come dangerously close to kissing her in that hallway. Had wanted to with an intensity that had caught him completely off guard. She was supposed to be a solution to a problem. A variable in an equation. But when Richard had dismissed her background, when he'd felt that surge of protective anger, when he'd found himself defending not just her honor, but her worth, that hadn't been acting. He downed the scotch and poured another. Article 11. No emotional attachment. He'd written the clause himself. He knew exactly why it existed. He just had to remember that before he did something catastrophically stupid. Like fall for the woman he'd hired to pretend to love him.